Hey folks, how is it going? I'm going to play just a little bit of another track. That's the Jump Blues, 12-bar Jump Blues backing track in G. That's kind of new from last week. Actually, I have two new tracks. Hey Dave. Let's see if I can do this with, that's this guy. I'm trying to share the track so you guys know what I'm playing over, even if they're not from my channel. So there's the blues in G. And then I'm going to take a whack. Actually, I was messing around with this other one last week before it was finished. And to be honest, I haven't really I put it up and then never got around it. Hey, Brian. So, this is the E one. This one, actually, I think I'm going to kind of turn it into a little bit of a, almost like a Freddie King instrumental for when I return to playing. I'm starting to kind of collect ideas. And this is one of them. So let's see. Oops, that's kind of a short thing on there. Maybe I'll skip the pickup phrase. Oop. Hey Jeff. Cool. Okay, how many folks we got here? I got 7. Enough of the jamming. That tune's going to be. I just like the chord progression with it. It's got a bridge, so it's mostly like a 12-bar blues. It's got the 1 chord, 4 chord, back to the 1 chord, just like a 12-bar. But instead of going 5 to 4, it goes 2, 5. So in E, it's going F sharp 7, B 7, E. So soloing over it, you can do a lot of like the blues stuff you would normally do. Hey Charles, when it gets to the kind of the turnaroundy part, you know, you've got the F sharp, and I've played it both ways where I'm actually really nailing down the chord changes. All right, something like that, or even just kind of ignoring it. I really like doing a like minor pentatonic blues phrasing over that. And then the bridge to it, it does the C sharp minor, B7, A7, B7, right? So it goes almost into the relative minor, which gives you, the ability to play your C sharp minor pentatonic, which is also your E major. So it's kind of doing double duty on this. I don't know. It's fun. It's kind of a blues. It's kind of got some extra changes, and it's kind of got a bridge. So it's an AABA form. It's got two 12 bars on the original. Regular, almost blues, but with the 2, and then the 5. So it does that twice, and then does the bridge once. And then it does one more A section before the whole phrase work repeats. So it's what was it, like 44 bars, I think, the way it works out, something like that. Anyway, enjoy it. I almost was thinking it might be kind of fun to do some kind of a contest. Have you guys maybe play over. Maybe I'll find a pedal or something like that that we could do a giveaway with, and have a couple of my online YouTube buddies all kind of do a blind judging on the videos, and or a judging on the videos. Just because I like the chord progression, and it kind of illustrates some of the stuff we talk about in the lessons in order to be able to play over it. So I could do like a full lesson on how to solo over it, and then you guys can, maybe play some solos and let us hear what you got. We can do something kind of fun with that. Anyway, today's actual lesson is supposed to be a continuation of the CAGED stuff. We're going to talk about triads and chords. If you look at the we have the playlist with all of the CAGED system lessons in it. CAGED Fretboard Theory Lesson Series. The last 2 live streams, here's the link for that playlist. The last 2 live streams for that basically covered the first video, the CAGED system for guitar. Actually, maybe I'll share my screen here. Can I do this? There is me. We're gonna mess with that. Sorry. But basically, this first video is the one that we've spent the last 2 lessons kind of talking about. We're going to kind of get into what we talk about at the end of the CAGED system, the first video here, and then the Learn Major Triad Inversions one. And it's also going to kind of cover a little bit of the next one here. So that's kind of the process that we're talking about. And if you need extra help, you can always go back and reference the videos in that playlist. But that's pretty much, we're in the realm of the first 3 videos. So real quick, audio is okay. I'm hoping you can hear everything. The backing track, we're not really going to use the backing track that much today, at least for this first part. Okay. Please feel free, if you have questions, to put them in the chat, and I will answer them as I come to breaks in this. If you are watching this pre-recorded or on the replay, put them in the comments below, obviously, and if you do that, then I'll come back and answer those questions in the comments or maybe in the next video. So it just kind of helps to let me know what's up. Okay, so last time, actually, let me get rid of all of this because that's eating my bandwidth. Hang on a second. I'm trying to do this so that I'm not messing up our video stream here. So we talked about root patterns, and then we talked about building scales, major scales within those root patterns. So I'm not going to get too far into that, but I'm going to kind of use that idea here for a minute. Let's just talk about, so let's say we've got, we were doing these in D. key of D last time, but this is actually our C root pattern from the CAGED system. All right. And I built a major scale here, root. I won't go review why I did it this way. It's in the previous videos, but I'm going to do it on here so you can kind of see the process. 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then going backwards, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. All right. Now the easiest thing for us to do with this is to take the root, take the roots, and we take all of the thirds within this pattern and all of the fifths. All right, and if we just move those ideas down here, root 3, 5, root 3, 5, and then there's a 5 and a 3 down here. I've just taken the circle things and moved them down. That actually just gives us a major triad, right? Those are the notes that are so in D, we have this D root pattern, right? It's a C shape, but we've moved up here, and now it's playing D notes. We have the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, root, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm sorry, 5, 4, 3, 2, root, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, root, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, root, right? So we have that, and then we've taken the notes that are the root, third, and fifth, and made a separate construct out of this, right? So root 3, fifth, root 3, fifth. All right, and then we also have the fifth and the third down here. All right, so if I was going to practice this by itself, I would think, you know, root 3, 5, root 3, 5, 3, root 5, 3, root 5, 3, 5, root. Starting and ending this pattern on the root, because we're, once again, like we talked about in the last couple lessons, we always want to start and end these ideas on the root so that we're training our brain to hear this sound, right? And we're calling these scale degrees out, or chord tones in this case, because we're talking about a chord, partially so that you can keep track of what note your finger is on, for reasons you're going to see later. But then the other part of it, it's also part of the ear training. It's going to help you actually utilize this stuff in a practical manner in a few minutes. All right, so you have those notes, and then you have all the other notes in the scale that aren't root 3 and 5. All right, so I'm going to, so we're doing this in D. We're going to play over a 1-chord backing track here. Unfortunately, the way YouTube is working, or the way my computer setup is working, I'm a little stuck with having to play my backing tracks off my phone through a Bluetooth speaker. And then, because if I do it through the computer that I'm streaming on, there's a certain amount of latency that kind of messes with, it makes it sound like I'm playing out of time all the time. Okay, so here's D. All right, and I can take, actually, I need to post this too. I'm trying to be better about posting the stuff that you guys need at the points in the lesson where we're doing it. Oops, playlists. Okay. So this is the track that I'm using here. It is 25 or 30 minutes of just one chord, which is perfect for lessons like this, because what's going to happen is you have the ability to just sit and work on a sound for that period of time, right? So if I was to take the major scale, here's the root pattern for the D, so you can hear it as being Ds. And if I play through the scale and use this as a metronome, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, root, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, root, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, root, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, root. That's a good way to practice this. Use the backing track as a metronome. Then try eighth notes. 1, so, yeah. 3, 4, root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, root 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, root 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, root 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, root. You don't have to call them out at that point. All you do is triplets. Or 16th notes. And part of the idea with this, and this is a little bit of a review from what I talked about last time, is that it's really difficult sometimes to make scale patterns that you learn on the page transition to something that you can use musically. So by using a backing track like this as your metronome, it forces you to kind of play in the pocket in a musical context. You're actually having to listen to a drum beat. You're actually having to make sure that you understand what those subdivisions are. If you can't see my hand in the shot we're just doing, I'm doing all alternate picking to start with. I tend to try and enforce the idea that you should alternate pick from the beginning, because once you can alternate pick strictly, then other things like economy picking, sweep picking, anything else you do becomes a lot easier to learn without really spending much time. I can sweep pick. I don't work on sweep picking, but because I've actually worked on the fine motor controls of my alternate picking, a lot of that stuff just kind of, it becomes pretty easy to pick up. It really does. So that's that. And this is, you know, it's not even 9 in the morning right now, so my hands are not really warmed up to start with, but because I've got the solid bass and the alternate picking stuff, it's kind of easy for me to kind of do this stuff not warm. Kind of food for thought. Now we're going to go back to our backing track, and what we're going to do is we're going to play just the chord tones for a minute. Root 3, 5, root 3, 5, 3, root 5. And you can do this as a picking exercise too. More ways that you practice your theory in time, the easier it is to actually use it musically. Just kind of keep that in mind. Now, those notes, it's really hard to make a melody out of that. So we use the other notes in the scale, the notes that we didn't circle, 2, 7, 4, 6. We use those as kind of tension notes. So I'm going root 3, 4. That 4 doesn't want to sit there, it wants to resolve, right? And one of the best things you can do ear training wise is go through something like this. Listen to each note. There's the root. Obviously it's going to work because it's the chord. There's the 2. Not the worst sound in the world, but it kind of wants to resolve. Or go up to the 3rd, right? So notes that are in the chord are going to feel more rested. Notes against the chord, those other 4 notes, they have a certain amount of energy. And that energy says, hey, I need to go to a chord tone. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you feel it. That 4 especially wants to go down to the 3rd because it's a half step away from a chord tone. There's the 7. Right? Because it's a half step away from a chord tone, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of energy. It gets drawn to the note that actually gives you the greatest release of that tension. Right? So when we're making simple melodies, right? Awful melody about root 3, 5, 6, 5. And as soon as I'm playing notes that are outside of that arpeggio, Now I've actually got the ability to create a question and then an answer phrase. Did you take the trash out? Yes, I did. Right, and you feel it. All right. Your ability to know where the chord tones are and play either the chord tones or the not chord tones, or what we call the tension notes, is one of the first steps to creating phrases that actually make sense to the ear, that makes sense the way someone speaks. You know, you can hear somebody in a language that you don't speak, and you have a pretty good idea if they're asking a question or they're making a statement, or, you know, sometimes, you know, mostly the emotion behind something, right? So our way of communication has these tonal inflections, these tonal bits, that they communicate something beyond just the context or the text of the word, right? So if I say, did you take the trash out? All right, my question doesn't have a resolved feeling melodically, believe it or not. You know, we're just talking about how you speak. All right, and then when my son goes, no, or I'll get it later. You know, when you're answering someone, you know, there's this feeling of resolution to the phrase. It's this other layer of communication that we have. And the reality is that if you use this idea in your improvised lines, it becomes a lot easier to play over something like this. If I'm playing over one chord backing track and someone says, hey, just play D major over it, most of us, when we first get the scale, are going to go, and it's like, well, why doesn't that sound cool? Well, because you're not really organizing your sounds. You know, if you're thinking, all right, I know that's a chord tone, and if I want to make something go away from being resolved, or to ask that question or create that tension, and then do that, I just play a note like the fourth, or I can play something, the 7 and then back. So one of the best things you can do, oops, stupid thing, when you're trying to get this stuff under your fingers in a way that allows you to solo or to improvise, is just play along with the sounds, you know. As you go through everything, I like doing this one too, where I'll start on the root. I started doing this a second ago. That's resolved. 2, not so resolved. 3 falls in a little bit better. 4's got energy. The 5's got less energy. 6. Maybe wants to go down to 5. 6. 7. A root. All right, you can do that yourself and just listen to what's coming out of the speaker and how it reacts to whatever you're playing over. Now, this is over one chord. If you're playing over multiple chords, this becomes a whole different, you know, bag of worms, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I'm going to pause just for a second, see if you guys have any questions. Have a drink of coffee. Yeah, you can do cool stuff with, I keep dropping my picks this morning. You can do stuff with the chord shapes, like I do this. Alright, you know, I'll play thirds through the scale. Alright, and they function the same way, because you have the first third where we're playing notes a third apart than the scale. That's the first 2 notes of that D chord. And then the next third, that's the 4 and the 2. Right, so even if I go, you feel that guy right there, that's actually part of the D chord. Like Jeff had mentioned, I played some cool stuff in the intro solo. Usually when people like that stuff, it's because I'm using a lot of the chord tone ideas. Right, and all those things work because what's happening is I'm using groupings of notes that are part of the chord, or I'm using notes that are outside of the chord, and I'm using that to work melodically. Even like with the sixths, I do a lot of these. Any of this stuff, you feel when those phrases want to resolve. And it's just a matter of getting your ears to think that way. For the longest time as a younger player, I struggled with the idea of like, I have to play all the notes in these chords. They say all these notes work with these chords, and there's got to be something to the fact that, you know, when you play fast, you play a lot of notes. And this idea that I'm organizing pitches into basically notes that have tension or energy against the chord and notes that don't, the ones that resolve or come to a rest, that was a long time in coming. And you know, I think about that even when I'm writing music. You know, when you write a chord progression, being able to write something that actually has an energy that drives the song one way or the other is really important. We'll do more on that later, but that's a kind of one of the non-soloing or non-improvising thoughts to this. So you can take any of your major scales, you know, and I'm not going to do all of them, and you can pull that major triad out of there. All right. But then you can also think about the fact that within this major triad, because you've got other chord, or within this major scale, you've got other chords, right? Because when we talk about playing in the key of something, it's not just a D chord. You know, if we're playing in most songs, you'll have like, if we're in the key of D, you know, G major, A major, B minor, E minor, F sharp diminished. Those are all parts of the chord progressions that work there. And what happens is you're building notes off of every scale degree. We're not going to get too far into the harmonized scale thing, but you can take, like, let's just take a different thing. If we were to, for instance, use the 5 chord, this will give you the most bang for the buck. So I'm going to circle in green. All right, that's the 5. All right, and I know, I'm not expecting you guys to know this right now, but a major arpeggio based off of the 5 chord would be these notes. And if I was to move this over here, root, I'll do this, crap. So the 5, 7, 2, 5, 7, 2, 5, right? That's out of the D major scale. Actually, maybe I should do it down here. 5, 7. All right. And if I say what these are relative to each other, if 5 is the root, and that's a G root pattern right there. All right, the 7 of D major is the 3rd, and the 2 is the 5. This is all relative to the G. This is this chord. All right, and so then we can look at this like, hey, I've got D major in this key, right, which is an important chord, but then I've also got, in this case, A major, which is the 5 chord, right? And even playing over just this one chord thing, right, I just played that A major, the 5 chord, using notes in the D scale, obviously, because they're all there, and then resolving to the D chord. Right? And that way of taking those two chords, A major, D major, A major, D major, A major, D major. I'm going back and forth between in the key and then using the chord that if it was a chord progression where we're writing like actual music, that's the chord that wants to resolve to the one chord the most. So by by bringing that note out with an arpeggio and then resolving to the D chord, we've actually got kind of a cool way of organizing these pitches that gives you a little bit of a different line too. I love using this like different triads against a chord to imply a harmony. So I've got, right, I just played, you know, from the, this is the A chord, right? And from the A chord, this is 3, 5, root, 3, 5, and then resolving it to the root of the D chord, right? And if we look at what notes those are in the D major scale, if we come back here, right, that's 7, 2, 5. Not too many chord tones, but then we resolve it to the root and it feels pretty good. Believe it or not, I stole that idea out of first place I saw was Django Reinhardt's solo in Sweet Georgia Brown. So something that was probably recorded in the 1930s, 20s or 30s. And he was using this idea of like, hey, here's the 5 chord and then into the 1 chord. And what that does is it creates a line that without having to even be heard over the harmony implies a harmony strong enough that the phrase standing on its own actually makes sense to the ear. Does that make sense? Okay. So within every major scale, right, this is kind of a backdoor way of looking at this. So all right, let's put this on paper for a second, just as another way of looking at how we organize this. But the reality is, I know a lot of you guys don't really read music. In the key of D major, if we start on D, which is what that guy is, and I'm just going to go up every note here. You have to forgive my sloppy writing. If this, hopefully this gives you an idea of how this is going to work. So then we build a major scale here. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And in a major scale, we learned last week that there are half steps between the 3rd and 4th notes and the 7th and 8th. All right, so if I'm going to put some accidentals in here, we'll make them in red so they stand out really good. The formula for a major scale is whole step, so D to E is a whole step. E to F is normally a half step, right? Because there's no black key on the piano there. All right. If this is losing you, you may want to take a minute and go back to the lessons that come before this one. But I think we should be able to carry on. So we have an F sharp here, and then F sharp to G is a half step, like we need between the 3rd and 4th notes. G to A is a whole step. A to B is a whole step. B to C naturally is a half step. So we have to raise the C to give us the whole step we need between these two guys. And then that gives us our last half step, 7 to 8. And that's the standard notation way of seeing what we have here. And if I was to write this in the tablature, hey, everybody loves triads. All right, so the scale pattern that we just wrote, 5, and then 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 2, and then 3. All right, so that's the D major scale as we've been playing it in that C root pattern. Now, the way harmony works for most of the stuff that we deal with in Western pop music is that we take the harmony, like we did for here, we did root, 3rd, 5th. Okay, and we know that this is an F sharp, right? Because all the Fs in this key have to be sharp. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the key of D, right? So those are the notes that we actually took out of the scale pattern. And if we continue this idea of building a pile of thirds on top of every note, you need a sharp there because there's a C sharp here in the key. We're going to get this group of notes or group of chords that are going to define this key. Yeah, and then this is back to our original key. All right, so these chords, their names are D major, this is E minor, this is F sharp minor, this is G major, A major, B minor, and C sharp diminished, and then we're back to D. All right, so we've just taken our major scale that we've built and we've harmonized it. We've actually built 7 chords, and those chords are only using the notes that are within this scale, and because they're doing that, they're giving us a system of notes that together define D as the key center, right? So if I was just to take and just play these chords here, like I've got D major, G major, A major, D, that's a pretty solid chord progression there. It's 1, 4, 5, 1. I can go 1, and then the B minor, which is the 6th chord, there's the 4, and there's the 1. So now we know all these chords that work together. If you're writing, you know, or if you're analyzing a song to figure out what key you're playing in. In school music, right, the first chord is major, and so is the 4th and the 5th. Right, so they get capital Roman numerals. This is kind of important as you're trying to kind of keep track of this stuff. The 2, 3, 6 are all minor chords, and they get lowercase Roman numerals, and 7 is diminished. Now, we'll come back to this in a minute, but let's talk about what makes the difference between major, minor, diminished, all this other stuff. And there's a way that I've been kind of doing this. Actually, we're going to try this in a grid today and see if this works. Okay. So I'm going to write out our scale here. We'll do like, so D is our 1. This is the first one. I'm just going to write scale degrees here. Nashville numbering. It's a little bit of the idea of Nashville numbering. All right, and then the next note will be D sharp or E flat. We're just going up the order of the notes like you'd find them on the piano keyboard. Then we have E. Then we have F, because there's no black key between E and F. Then we have F sharp, which is also G flat. Keep in mind that every one of those black keys has 2 note names. And then we've got G natural, and then we've got G sharp, and A flat, and then we've got A natural, A sharp, or B flat. We have B. We have C, because there's no black key between B and C. Then we've got C sharp, which is the same as D flat. Then we've got D again. All right, and if I number each of these notes. Dogs are here. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just numbering these in order of their placement versus the root. And you'll see we have 12 discrete note names. And then if we come back to the root, or the D, right, that's the 13th note. Now, we just talked about the fact that if we go from, when we build our major scale, our major chord, we're using D, F sharp, and A. All right. Actually, let me back this up just for a second. If we do this in terms of the notes of the D major scale, D is the 1, E is the second note of the scale, F sharp is the third note of the scale, G is the 4th, A is the 5th, B is the 6th, C sharp is the 7th note, and then D is the octave again. All right, gotta keep that in mind for a second. Now, I love the colors. So D major is the root, the third note, which is F sharp, and A. All right, and that's our 1 chord. I probably should have done this a little bit differently. All right. I'll put a capital 1 right there. Our second chord in this key, in case you guys can't tell, I'm experimenting on how ways to communicate this with you guys. So we've got the second note, which is E. We got the third note, or the fourth note, which is G. And then the sixth note of the scale, which is B. All right, so those notes make up the 2 chord. If we were to start on the third note of the scale, we will have F sharp, we will have A, and we will have C sharp. All right. So we have here D major, E minor, F sharp minor. Bear with me on this one. I know this is kind of a long ways to go with something like this, but I think it's going to pay off with how you understand how this works. Okay, so then the fourth chord here, all right, the fourth chord starts on the G. We skip a note, we go to the B, and we've got D again. All right, and the 4 chord is G major. The weird thing for a lot of people is trying to understand why these chords are major and minor. Why does this work out this way? And this is part of what I'm trying to illustrate. So if you're patient with me, we can do this. So the 5 chord starts on A, C sharp, and then unfortunately I have to go back past D to E. Probably could have done this a little differently. Now I'm looking at it. That gives us A major. The 6th chord is B. Whoops. D, and then F sharp. What happened to my page here? There it goes. Oops. And then the last chord here, oops, which is B minor. And then the last chord here is going to be the 7 diminished, which is going to be C sharp. And then we've got E and G. Okay, you guys follow me so far? There are no augmented chords in this whole thing. If I were to do the simple thing of numbering how many half steps there are between notes, this becomes a little bit easier to understand. All right, so these are the notes that occur naturally within a major scale. What color haven't I used here? That would be useful. Let's find a color. Oops. Yellow. Maybe yellow will work. Orange. Let's use orange. Okay. So if we take a look at how many notes or how many half steps are between the notes in this chord, right? If we count up, we've got 1, because I'm going from the first note to the second note in the chromatic scale. 2, 3, 4, up to the third. All right, and then if we do from here, 1, 2, 3. So the D major chord has 4 and then 3 as far as the distances between the notes. All right, if I go to the E, it's 1 to the F, 2 to the G sharp, or F sharp, and then 3 to the G. And then we've got 1 to G sharp, 2 to A, 3 to B, and 4. All right, so the minor chord goes 3 and then 4, because basically what we've done in order to make a major chord minor is we've lowered the third a half step. All right, lo and behold, we do the same thing here on F sharp. We got 1 to G, 2 to G sharp, 3 to A, and then from A to C sharp, 1 to A sharp, 2 to B, 3 to C, 4. You start seeing a pattern here. Right, these are the distances between the root, third, and fifth. All right, this guy here, major, so we're going 1 to G sharp, 2 to A, 3 to A sharp, 4 to B, and then from B to D, it's 1 to C, 2 to C sharp, and then 3 to the D. So this guy is another one of these 4 and 3 guys. If we're here on the E, oops, no, the A, I'm sorry. We're going 1 to A sharp, 2 to B, 3 to C, 4 to C sharp. And I'm having to do this wraparound thing here. So from C sharp, 1 to D, 2 to D sharp, 3 to E, and then from E to A, which is the fifth note, we're going 1 to F, 2 to F sharp, 3 to G. Am I doing this right? F, F sharp, G, 4. Oh, no, I'm not supposed to be doing that one. Sorry guys, my brain didn't get enough coffee. So it should be 1, 2, and then 3 to E. I apologize for that. All right, so then this guy, this major chord is also 4 and then 3. F sharp minor, or I'm sorry, B minor for the 6th chord, right? 1 to C, 2 to C sharp, 3 to D, and then from D, it's 1 to F sharp, 2 to E, 3 to F, and then 4 to F sharp. So this minor is a 3, 4. And then the C sharp, this is where it gets a little funky, right? C sharp to D is 1, D sharp is 2, 3 is E, right? And then from E to G, E to F is 1, F sharp is 2, 3 is G. Now, there's another way of looking at this. When we've got 4 half steps, oops, it's going to look like it's at 4.5 steps. that equals a major third. And 3 half steps equals a minor third. Right? So in reality, a major chord if we're looking at our little 4-3 ratio here, is actually a major third stacked on top of a minor third, or a minor third stacked on top of a major third. All right, and a minor chord is 3 and 4. So the bottom interval is a minor third, and the top one is a major third. Because ultimately, the 5th note of the scale doesn't change between these things. All right, the diminished chord is 3 and 3, which is 2 minor thirds. Bookmark this thought, because when we talk about symmetrical chords and scales, diminished and augmented sounds, this is kind of an important thing. The one we didn't talk about is an augmented chord. If we're doing these formulas for these, because it's root 3 and then we raise the 5th, it's 4 and 4, which is major 3 and major 3. Okay, I'm going to pause just for a second because this is a little bit different than how most people communicate these ideas, but that's part of why we're doing this the way that we're doing this, is I'm trying to give you guys another way of looking at all this stuff that you can find a million different ways of people talking about this, but there's really only a couple ways that they typically communicate it, especially if it's not specifically for guitar players. And what I'm trying to do is say, hey, within a major scale, we have 7 chords, and these 7 chords are mostly major and minor with 1 diminished chord. But the reasons why these chords are major and minor and diminished is because the notes, if you're only using the notes in a major scale and you're not doing anything weird, they end up being these distances as you move through the scale. Okay, coffee break. I started talking about this to students a couple weeks ago like this. I just figured if we could just break it down into all 12 notes and kind of look at it almost like a grid, for some people that might work. And most of my online people are you guys are tech savvy or IT people, or you're creative people who use technology a lot. I don't know, I thought maybe this would be kind of a cool approach. So please, like, one of the things is give me a little bit of feedback on how this is working for you, if this is helping you see it. I love the idea, like, that you can look at something one way as much as you want, right? And if you just look at this as a silhouette, you don't know if this handle is that drawn on, or is that something that's 3-dimensional. But if we turn it and look at it from another angle, suddenly, hey, look, there's something different going on here. And part of my adventure in teaching guitar and even general music theory is that you sometimes have to teach the same thing and rotate it for the students. And eventually you'll find something that works with every student's abilities to learn, because everybody takes information in different ways. And when I was learning this stuff, or like when you go to music school, typically I'm actually getting a kid ready for going to composition school, a high school student, and I pulled out, these were my textbooks from when I went back to school just recently, right? And when you're taking Harmony 1, all of your homework looks like this on paper. All right, and then sometimes you have to play it on piano. There's a reason why I've taken probably 5 years of piano. I'm a horrible piano player. But the idea in music school is that that's the one instrument that lays it all out kind of in a row. And it's just an important skill to have when you're a music student or a composition student. But then guitar players, you know, they still teach guitar players, hey, here's this scale pattern that, you know, just put your fingers here and it's going to be that scale. But then we never really get all of the subtleties of what's going on here. So what we're trying to do is I'm trying to turn the theory on its side for you guys to look at it a little bit differently. Cool, Brian. I'm glad. This is it really is a different way of looking at it, but I really I'm starting to like teaching it this way because literally it's like every piece is out there. You don't really have to imagine too much. A lot of times when we talk about this other stuff, you kind of have to visualize or imagine things that you don't necessarily know yet, which is a little challenging. Okay, so within this is one way of looking at it. Let's do it this way. So, and would you guys want it if I took my notes here and made them a PDF that you guys could download this week? Would this be helpful? Please say yes if it is, and I'll say I don't save these. I usually erase them like it's a dry erase board, but I can actually just save this stuff and do something with it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about these arpeggios. So we've had, this was our D major arpeggio. Now, just by taking these notes and moving them around, we're able to make other chords or other triads, right? So if I wanted to make this minor, I'm going to lower the third, right? So let's keep the 5 and the root the same. Oops. All right, but then the third is the note that changes. So instead of being where the third is here, we're lowering it a half step. And you do it here and here. This is the easy way of doing this. It's not necessarily the most convenient. A lot of times when I think about this, I'll take that minor third there and I'll move it up here. Okay, so let me so here's our first arpeggio. Am I plugged in? Oh, okay. So we got root, major third. Oops, let's do this, you know what I'm doing. Okay, so root, major third, 5, root, major third, 5, and then back down, and then I've got the 5 and the third down here. If I want to make it minor, I lower the third 1 fret. Root, minor third, 5, root, minor third, 5. This one, that's great for sweeping. If I'm actually doing other stuff though, because the minor scale pattern I would normally play here, whether it's minor or Dorian, I would probably play the minor third here. I would play root, minor third, 5th. Oops. So root, minor third, 5th, root, minor third, 5th. There's minor third, root, 5, minor third, root, 5, and then minor third down there, because that's the only place you got it, and then back. Alright, if I wanted to make this diminished, I'm lowering the third and the 5th. So let's keep our roots in the same place. We have our minor third. We'll just do this for right now, minor 3. All right, and then we're going to lower the 5th. So instead of the 5th being here, it's a diminished 5th. We'll say flat 5, more common. Flat 5, flat 5, right? So that gives us a diminished triad. Root, minor 3rd, flat 5 or diminished 5, root, minor 3rd, flat 5, minor 3rd, root, flat 5, minor 3rd, root, flat 5, minor 3rd, flat 5, root. I'm not thinking very clear. All right, and then the last one is if we want to, whoops, make this a an augmented, the root and the 3rd are in the same places, but let's raise the 5th. So we're going to go sharp 5, sharp 5. All right. This is a chord that doesn't happen typically in your major and minor scales. So root, major 3rd, sharp 5, root, major 3rd, sharp 5, major 3rd, root, sharp 5, major 3rd, root, sharp 5, 3, sharp 5, root. Okay, so those are the 4 triad types. And let me actually mark these guys up here. Major, minor, diminished, and augmented. All right, and you can do this. I'm only doing this in one root pattern today. I wanted to talk more about the subject in general, and you guys can take the workbook, and you guys can take the information that you know to this point, and a great exercise just to write this stuff out on your own. Okay, it doesn't hurt to say, hey, you know what? Oops. All right, in the major here, the notes are going to be, this is D, F, whoops, F sharp and A. And then the minor, we lower it, so it's D, F natural, and A. Diminished, D, F natural, A flat. And then augmented is D, F sharp, and A sharp. All right. The more ways that you cross-reference this stuff, the easier it is for you to remember it. And as you do it on paper like this, it gets it into your brain in a way that it makes it easier for your brain to work your fingers. A lot of times people say, well, I'm just going to memorize the physical patterns. All right. And I've kind of discovered that for most of us, that doesn't really work that great. You can memorize physical patterns all you want, but unless you actually understand the context of that pattern and also how it fits into the bigger picture of what you're trying to do, it's hard to retain that information, and it's hard to take that information and utilize it in other formats. So, okay, so let me, I have a couple things that have just popped up. Brian says, you're just showing how chords are built diatonically. That is exactly correct. The word diatonically refers to the fact that we've got a 7-note scale that's built off of the interval of a second. Everything's either a major or a minor second. And that's a major second is a whole step, a minor second is a half step. Bruce says yes. I'm assuming that means that you're following what I'm talking about. If I don't have that right, clarify for me. Brian says a PDF would be great, and that is cool. I can do that today. That's not too hard for me to take care of. Terry says, let's have a spelling contest. And can I get one of my kids out here to do that? Maybe my daughter. She's really, really good at that stuff. Me, I'm glad I have spell check. If it wasn't for spell check and Grammarly, you guys would think I had been dropped on my head at the age of 3 and then fed paint chips for the rest of my life. Okay, what time is it? 9:41. That's a whole lot of music theory for the day. The cool thing about this, though, is like, I know... Oh, good. Okay, Bruce, I got that. You know, I know where these scales are. So if I'm playing over something like this D chord, most of that was D major with a couple notes added for melody. Right? One of my favorite licks you guys are probably tired of hearing about is my triad with the fourth of the scale added. So 4-3 root 5, 4-3 root 5, 4-3, and I use that. And then maybe with playing the 5 chord, right? Using that, basically I'm the key of D, so the 5 chord is A major. That's my Django Reinhardt theft, and then resolving it into the D. I could, if I wanted to, play other chord progressions using the chord tones. Here's F sharp, A, D minor. Actually, let me do this again. E minor, A7, and then into the D. Right. So even if I'm I can just arpeggiate. There's E minor 7. There's my A major with the 4 added, and then resolving into that. And it gives me these phrases where playing those triads as a chord progression over this one chord allows me to take a line and extend it, keep it interesting, right? Your ear is hearing the fact that it's a chord progression, even if you don't know what it is. You're also hearing that at a certain point, it's going to kind of come to rest. If I just play E minor over the D, not so much, right? But if I'm playing E minor, A7, and then playing the D major, that makes sense. And it makes sense. This was legal now, right? Because it followed a typical chord progression and it resolved to what we're playing over. I say this all the time. A note is never wrong until you stop. Right? Other people say there's no such thing as a wrong note, only poor resolutions. I can play all kinds of really wacky stuff and it's going to work. But understanding what we're talking about today gives you a way of organizing, and I love this term, organizing your sounds, in ways that help you actually create structure and create phrases and have things actually make sense instead of just kind of hunting and pecking through a scale pattern. We can all hunt and peck through a scale pattern, but then it just sounds like you don't know where your phrase is going. But when I play something longer, like I can just meander through a major scale. Oops. But if I play something that has more structure to it, and that phrase actually said something because it went there. Right? E minor pentatonic actually, A altered dominant, and then resolved in there. So I'm just using other scales. And if I didn't tell you what I was playing, right? It still sounds like it's in D major, but I took a little side trip and that worked. And that's using a lot of stuff that's outside of the key. if I stay in the key, I'm not playing very clearly. All right, you know, I can play these longer phrases that go someplace. They say something, and then they answer something. Structure is one of those things that when we're learning guitar licks, we don't really think about so much. You know, I mean, honestly, it really is one of those things that it's hard to get away with telling somebody, hey, we're gonna talk about structure in your soloing in the beginning, because most people go, I just want to learn a Stevie Ray Vaughan lick, or I just want to learn these cool things. If I learn all these cool things that my favorite players do, then I'll be able to play like them. And there's a certain truth to that, but you're just playing exactly what they're playing. Whereas I know, because of all the stuff that I know, if I analyze what they're doing, I can not only play what they're playing, but I can take what they're playing and I can repurpose it, or I can synthesize it into another situation. I talked about Django Reinhardt. I sound nothing like Django Reinhardt. All right. In the licks that I'm playing today, you know, I've been beating up that Django Reinhardt thing. Right, the major triad with a fourth I got from David Gilmour from Pink Floyd. I've been doing this thing where I'm playing like bending up to the major third, and then using my pinky on the bent note to play the fourth. That's Larry Carlton. All right, a lot of stuff that I've kind of stolen from other places, and then I've been able to take those ideas and synthesize them in other things. One of the things I've been doing a lot of, maybe too much of, there's two things, and one of them is Hideaway. Right? And I love, like over blues, taking the bits and pieces of Hideaway and repurposing them into other scales. If I was to, for instance, where to go? Blues backing tracks, blues guitar lessons, jazz backing tracks, guitar lessons. Oh, there we go. All right, so here's the jump blues when I was playing in G before. Talk about all the crap out of that you hear me play pretty much every week as part of my warm-up. You know, there were bits of Stevie Ray Vaughan in there. There were bits I've stolen from Jerry Reed, a lot of the double stop. There are things, one of these like, right, that's actually a piano turnaround from Reese Winans off of Stevie Ray Vaughan record. You know, there was Hideaway in there from Freddie King. Right, but because I have this understanding of what all of those notes are relative to the key that I stole them out of, I'm able to actually synthesize them into something else. And you don't necessarily hear, oh, he stole that from Albert King or whatever, or B.B. King. But you know, that's where a lot of my vocabulary comes from. It's everybody steals, but you know, part of the trick is making sure nobody knows where you stole it from. But you only really have the ability to do that if you understand what you're playing and how to turn that into other things. So, okay, questions, folks, guys. I'd say ladies and gentlemen, but I'm pretty sure that there are no ladies on this. I was looking at my demographics on YouTube, and my the gender demographics are 99.7% male, ages 25 to 55. So I've got an audience, 85 to 6, or 25 to 65, 85, something like that. So anyway, it's always kind of fun to like have YouTube tell you who's actually watching your stuff. All right, so you guys would like me to turn my scribbling into a PDF, which is easy enough to do. It's just going to take me a couple minutes, so probably by this afternoon I'll have that posted up. I'll have a new. I'm working on a power chord lesson, which actually is more than just showing you where power chords are, but it's also to kind of help you see how this stuff kind of crawls across the fretboard. It's kind of another one of these things where I'm teaching something basic, but then sneaking in some fretboard realization on top of it. So that'll be the next pre-recorded lesson. I'll be continuing this, but we're going to talk about other scales, modes. We'll talk about modes a bit on Wednesday night. Keep in mind that if you're not available for the live stream, this is always, I leave all of these up. I'm starting to organize these and put them into their own, basically the CAGED system, like a playlist, basically. So they'll be easy to find. Mindless grindcore. Probably not. I've got the mindless part down. I'm not so much on the grindcore. But you know, after we do the scale stuff, I might take because this will be like 4, 5, 6 of these in a row. Actually, there'll be 2. I guess there'll be. What I should do is the next one. After major and minor scales, the next one should be pentatonic scales, I think. Let's talk about pentatonic scales, and then we'll talk about modes, and then we'll do some mindless grindcore or something like that, or some fun blues applications or something. You know, this is pretty dry for a lot of folks, I think. So, all right. Anybody have any other questions before I split? You know the usual. Please hit the like, and if you're not subscribed, please subscribe and hit the notification button. Just as a side note, I know it's a little confusing because of Jack's guitar tracks. My name is actually Mark. I've suddenly realized a lot of people are calling me Jack online. Jack is our wonderful previous dog. Who's the logo for this channel. I should do like a Jack retrospective, but part of the reason why we're honoring Jack this way is because literally I can't go to the NAMM show or travel without some stranger guitar player coming up and going, "Hey, how's Jack?" or "Hey, I really miss Jack," and it just made sense to do it. So Brian does have a question. Discuss augmented diminished chords, how to use them. Actually, that would be another great, because I was actually talking about that earlier about symmetrical sounds. That will actually be a great lesson too. Probably could have well, we didn't really have time to cover it today, but that's one of those things I do want to talk about. Part of my whole grid system here came about because I was trying to explain how a symmetrical, like a diminished chord, because all of the notes are equidistant from each other, no note is primary, so every note is a root. So there's really only 3 diminished chords. It's just that they regenerate. That's why you get like Yngwie Malmsteen, like. All right, and it's the same finger all the way through. All right, is because they're all, every note in a diminished sound is a minor third apart, and every note in an augmented sound is a major third apart. All right, so even like that augmented chord works great as a whole tone scale sound. We'll talk about using that stuff. That stuff, I don't get to play the augmented stuff as much. The diminished stuff is more useful for the bluesy stuff, or like when you're playing metal, or even gospel music. So we'll spend some time on that, definitely. But always, guys, do me a favor, remind me when you have requests or topics like that. Don't assume I remember stuff from week to week. Always hit me up. Say, hey, you haven't done the diminished scale thing yet, and we'll talk about that, because you got diminished triads, you got multiple kinds of diminished scales, you've got the arpeggios that can regenerate, and then there's the ways that we can actually utilize them. Augmented chords, I don't have quite as much useful content on that, but it's still something we should cover. So, all right, guys, thank you very much for hanging out. This was good. This is a solid 90 minutes or so. I'll see you all on Wednesday, and Terry, I will see you in 3 minutes on Zoom. Bye, guys.